it tonight, and we will be having it closed captioned and posted on our website at a later date and time in case you want to review the content or you just kind of want to revisit what we discussed tonight. So I'm very excited for all of you to meet Traffic Officer Michael Ramsey. He's been with the Fremont Police Department for 9 years and been in our traffic unit. It's currently assigned to our traffic unit. He is a motorcyclist, so he's been riding a motorcycle for about 25 years. So he's very experienced in one of his passions. He also has 3 dogs. It's just really my honor for him to speak with you all tonight. We will be monitoring the chat to answer any questions, and we will also have a period at the end of the presentation to answer questions as best as that we can. And enjoy tonight's presentation. This is really for you guys, for your information, to try to get as much knowledge as possible on teen safety tonight, okay? All right, enjoy. And Officer Ramsey, the floor is yours.
Let's unmute that mic. So good evening, everybody, and welcome. Excited to be here with you all tonight. Share the screen here. So tonight we're going to be talking about traffic safety. And so why are we here? Well, it's just that traffic safety. We're only 4 months into this year, going into now May, our 5th month. And we've already had 5 fatal traffic collisions where someone has lost their life. We consider a loss of life from a fatal traffic accident as something that's preventable because we can all change our behaviors of how we act as pedestrians, bicyclists, or even driving a motor vehicle. So tonight we're going to talk about some traffic safety and a little bit about what the traffic officers do for this department when you see us out there on our motorcycles. So we'll get started here with our slide presentation. So again, tonight we'll go over use of a cell phone, the proper way and what's allowed by the law, as well as what's dangerous or what could get you a citation. We'll talk a little bit about what is a DUI, driving under the influence, and then again, some tips for pedestrian safety. Some of the traffic signs you may see, a lot of you joining us tonight are younger, newer drivers. So, what do these signs mean, and how do we act when we see these signs? And then I'll be here to answer any questions you may have. So the traffic unit for this department is made up of motorcyclists. We all ride police motorcycles. You seen? Okay. So we ride police motorcycles partly for mobility. It allows us to get through traffic. And our job is traffic investigation to find out what caused a collision, and then traffic safety by issuing citations or by giving people warnings. So there's about 14 of us on motors working for the department. And then we have some CSOs that help with the parking compliance and towing and different issues that may happen in the neighborhood. We have 2 sergeants and then a lieutenant. So we'll talk first a little bit about the younger drivers. When you get your license as a provisional driver, when you're under 18 years old or you're a minor, there's some things to remember. During the first 12 months, a minor cannot drive between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. You're not allowed to transport passengers under 20 years old. I know that's a real bummer. I mean, a lot of times I stop some of the young kids that are around the high school areas pre-COVID when you were all back in school, and you got your 3 friends in the car, you're going to get lunch, and you're on a provisional license. That's something that you could be cited for, but it's also something that's dangerous because you've got the distractions as a new driver trying to focus on the road when you've also got your friends in the vehicle with you. So that's a real important one to remember, that you can't take anybody under 20 years old, and then you would have to be accompanied by a licensed parent or guardian or someone over 25 years old if you were to have that passenger, unless it was something like an emergency where you were taking a little brother or sister to the hospital. So let's talk now about distracted driving. distracted driving causes more and more accidents. I'd say now more so than speeding. Those of you that may not know, we all know that you can have a cell phone in a vehicle and you have to use it hands-free. But if you're under 18, it's against the law to have a cell phone in the vehicle and use it at all. So let's talk a little bit about some of the vehicle code. First, we got vehicle code 23123A. For any adult using cell phone, it must be hands-free. You need to have it mounted to the dash. A lot of times it's popular to get those vent holders that you'll put it in the vent or in the lower portion of the windshield, the lower 7 inches on the driver's side. And that way it's not blocking your view, but it's got to be hands-free. And this is, again, keeping us from getting distracted, looking down at our cell phone. So if you're talking on the phone, you either got to have a headset in with Bluetooth or using that speaker function so that the phone is hands-free. Vehicle code 23123.5 does allow you to touch and operate a cell phone, but it's got to still be in that holder, and you can only do it's a touch or a swipe, such as answering a phone on the iPhone. You can touch and swipe it to answer the call. That would be allowed. You could touch to activate a function such as your GPS, but sitting there and typing and manipulating the screen, even if it's in a holder, is still against the law, because for those brief few moments that you're looking over at that cell phone, you're taking your eyes off the roadway. Just like in this picture we see here, suddenly all the other traffic becomes a blur because you're focused in on that device. So that's dangerous. And again, unless it's a quick touch or swipe, you can't be still sending a text message and scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. So you got to keep that phone hands-free and not using it. And then this is the big one for all of our minors joining us tonight. Vehicle code 23124A. This prohibits minors or persons under the age of 18, and pay attention to this, it's from using a cell phone or the handheld electronic device while driving, whether it's hands-free or not. So this includes talking on the phone, texting, or typing. Unless it's an emergency and you need to call 911, even that call to mom or dad or to a family member because you're going to pick someone up is not allowed. So if you have to use the phone for an emergency, you could use it, pull over the side of the road safely. But otherwise, if you need to talk to mom, dad, a family member, or even to call your friends, you need to pull into a parking lot so that you've stopped the vehicle and you're not chancing being involved in a collision, because otherwise you could be ticketed for using the cell phone if you're under 18. So DUIs. A lot of you have probably heard the term DUI, and most everybody thinks driving under the influence. That's alcohol. But more and more we're seeing young children, kids, and even adults using marijuana with the rules in California that have legalized marijuana. More and more people are partaking in this drug, as well as prescription medication. Could be something that you were given from an injury or prescribed by a doctor. A lot of these prescription medications can affect your ability to drive and operate a motor vehicle. So you could be pulled over for swerving, for not maintaining a lane, and during the officer's contact with you, he finds out that you had smoked marijuana earlier or had some medication. That could be something that could get you arrested for driving under the influence. The most common thing is still alcohol, but marijuana is becoming something more and more that we're seeing. And for the young people or adults that may partake in this, I would remind you that you may feel okay and may think, just like the people who sometimes had 1 or 2 drinks and think they're okay, more times than not, you're not. So that's going to affect your reaction times. It's going to slow everything down to where when that car pulls out in front of you or that pedestrian pulls out in front of you, you're unable to stop or to avoid, and you could be involved in a collision. If you're involved in a collision and you're found to have alcohol or any drug, the charges that you could face are enhanced when you're under the influence. So we will oftentimes stop somebody and run them through what's called field sobriety tests. If you've ever seen on TV or maybe seen an officer on the side of the road, there are certain tests that are scientific in how we check eyes, your ability to maintain balance or to walk in a straight line. And just remember too, if you do get arrested for a DUI, you're required by law to submit to a blood or breath test to determine if there are drugs or alcohol in your system. If you don't submit to that because somebody told you, oh, you don't have to listen to that officer, you can refuse. You can face steeper fines and suspensions from the DMV. And then an officer, if they've got the probable cause, they can write a warrant to still get that blood. So it's best to just cooperate with the officer. But even better is to make the right decision. If you've had any type of alcohol, drugs, or prescription medication, please don't drive your vehicle. So we covered a little bit again, just with the marijuana. There's a health and safety code that talks about what is allowed for people with the new rules and laws that California has for possession or use of cannabis. But again, it's still important to remember it is illegal to possess or ingest marijuana if you're under 21. If you get stopped by a officer, and you're contacted and you're found to have it, some of the penalties you can face if you're under 18 years of age, you'll have to do 4 hours of drug education class, as well as 10 hours of community service. People over 18 can face a $100 fine. And also, with your using marijuana, for the adults, moms and dads that are here joining us tonight, even though marijuana is legal in California, you can't smoke it in a public place or within 1,000 feet of a school. And you can't smoke it while driving a vehicle, even if you're a passenger. So a lot of times people smoke marijuana in a car thinking, well, it's legal now, just like a cigarette. But I remind them, well, it's the same as alcohol. You wouldn't be drinking a beer while driving down the road. You can't smoke marijuana while driving in a vehicle. So sometimes you'll hear that we're setting up a DUI checkpoint. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yep.
Yeah.
How does submitting blood for DUI apply to minors? Does a parent have to be contacted before this process happens?
For a minor with a blood, if they're under arrest, that there's still something they would have to submit to. So we generally, as a courtesy, will contact parents, but that's not something that's required, that we would have to reach out and contact the parent to get their permission. If we've got the probable cause, we've stopped a vehicle for swerving or maybe even an accident, they have to submit to a PAS test per when they take the test for the DMV and get their license. It's something that you consent to when you're accepting your license, that you would submit to a PAS if you're under 21, as well as not refuse to submit to a blood test if you are placed under arrest. But again, generally with a young minor, we're going to contact mom and dad and probably have them meet us out at the scene just to, again, keep the parents in the loop so they know what's going on. So with a checkpoint, you oftentimes see us out there. We've got a portion of the roadway funneled down into one lane. The purpose of a checkpoint is really to educate the public, to remind the public about some of the things we've already talked about, that DUI doesn't mean just booze. It can be these other things we've talked about, that marijuana or the prescription medication that could affect your driving and get you into an accident. So we're there to educate, but also hopefully deter people. And again, when they hear of that checkpoint, it just reminds people to be safe, to not drive if they've been drinking. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to cite or arrest people for driving under the influence or other violations we may see during the checkpoint. So again, a reminder that it is unlawful for a driver under 21 to have a BAC, which is your blood alcohol content, of 0.01 or higher. That's because someone under 21 is not allowed to drink in California. They're not legal. So any small amount of alcohol is against the law. For adults, anyone over 21 of the legal age to drink a BAC of 0.08, that's the legal limit. So anything higher than that would be considered illegal. Though if you're involved in a collision and found to have even 0.06 or 0.04, you could be arrested and could be charged still with driving under the influence, because that could have had an effect and caused that accident. So now we'll move into some driver safety tips. Well, first, again, we've talked about we're having more and more collisions and fatal collisions, and most of our collisions are going to be preventable. It's somebody making an unsafe lane change, running a red light, not slowing down at a crosswalk area when a pedestrian's crossing, a bicycle running through a stop sign when they're supposed to stop just like vehicles. So some of the best driver safety tips is, first off, when you're driving, be predictable, obey the rules of the road, watch for road signs and signals, and then expect the unexpected. Look out for pedestrians. Expect that a pedestrian could be running out from in between two cars or passing through that crosswalk. Make sure that you yield to pedestrians that are in crosswalks. If you see everybody slowing down in the number 1 lane or left lane, that might be a clue that someone's crossing the road. They've seen something that you haven't yet. And that causes a lot of collisions sometimes, where the car on the right lane, the number 2 lane, passes through while a pedestrian was crossing and hits that pedestrian. So if you see people stopping, start looking around, start slowing your speed so that you could be able to yield to that pedestrian. And then follow our speed limits. Know your speed. I stop so many people for speeding, and the first thing I ask them is, I say, do you know what the speed limit is on this roadway? Sometimes they tell me, no, we should know the speed limit on the street that we're driving on. Or sometimes they tell me, oh, it's 45 here, when actually it's 35. So there may be portions of a road you're used to, such as Paseo Padre in the north end. It could be 45 miles an hour. But you get down in between Maury and Stevenson on Paseo Padre, the speed limit drops to 30 because of all the pedestrians in the area and the collisions we've had. And then it changes back to 35 going into the south end. So know your speed, know the speed limit around you, look for that speed sign and act and drive accordingly. And then remember, slowing for school zones. There's going to be different speed zones in the school when there are children present, as well as in residential areas. So again, a lot of you are younger adults. Some of you may be driving, some of you may not be driving. You're walking to and from school, to your friend's house. So pedestrian safety, just like we talked about with the vehicles, you want to be predictable. You want to be seen. And as a pedestrian, you need to follow the rules of the road, which would be not crossing a roadway against a red hand. You got to wait till you see that symbol that tells you it's okay to walk before crossing a roadway. Even if you think, oh, I can make it across this roadway, it's safe, no one's coming. You may not see that vehicle that's coming quickly or turns out of a driveway and hits you. So be predictable, follow the rules of the road, and then use crosswalks whenever possible. In areas where there isn't a crosswalk, then you need to be very careful and checking and making sure that you're making eye contact with those vehicles, that they're seeing you and slowing down so that you can cross the road safely. And then lastly, we want to be alert. We want to be looking around for these vehicles, these other things that could be a hazard for us. So don't get distracted by looking down at your cell phone. Or if you're listening to music and you got that headset on, there's nothing wrong with listening to music, but that might mean being more alert or removing one earpiece as you're coming up to an intersection to cross, just so you can hear all the different sounds, horns, sirens from emergency vehicles to make sure it is safe to cross the roadway. then we want to be visible. Wear bright clothing if you can, or if you're going out for a walk, even in walking to a friend's house, or to school when we get back to in-person school, having a reflective vest or some type of reflective clothing if it's going to be early morning or late into the evening where it starts to get dark. Use a flashlight if you have to at night, because a lot of times, there's streets that aren't, well lit, and it's harder to see you. If you're wearing that black sweatshirt and black jeans because it looks cool and that's your style, I know it's no fun sometimes to change up the way you dress, the way you look, but at the end of the day, this is for your safety. So I want to do everything I can for myself, and I want you all to do anything you can for yourselves to make yourselves more visible. And then again, just looking around, especially at nighttime, expect that vehicles may not see you. Where their headlights are reflections, they might not be able to pick up that you're crossing the roadway. So just because you're in a crosswalk and you're walking out and you're seeing one vehicle stop, expect that another vehicle may not see you and stop. You may have to just take it a foot or two at a time while crossing a crosswalk, slowly and safely, to make sure all vehicles are coming to a stop. And then walk smart. Use sidewalks if they're available. And otherwise, if there's not one, to make sure we're staying to the far right and walking alongside that right-hand shoulder of the roadway. Again, trying to be visible, having that well-lit clothing so that you're seen. So now a little bit about some of the signs and traffic calming devices that we use throughout the city. Remember, you're responsible to follow any sign. Sometimes a sign could say no right on red, even though you know that you can make a right turn on a red light once you've come to a stop. So a lot of these signs get put up and the sign will take precedence. So if it says you can't go straight through this intersection, like the middle picture here, between 3 and 7 p.m. on a Monday through Friday, and it's today, it's right now we're Thursday, it's 6:24 p.m. Well, I can't go straight through at this intersection because of that sign. If it's 9 in the morning, then I can. And again, you're going to see a lot of no right turn on red. Need to pay attention and be looking for these signs. And then like this first picture here out in front of near the Starbucks on Civic, we get a lot of people that like to drive down this bike lane or park and stop in the bike lane while their friends run in to go get coffee. That's a designated bike lane, and it has a space cushion, as you can see those diagonal lines. That's made to give a cushion between where the vehicles drive by and the bicyclists. And again, it's for everybody's safety. So as a driver, make sure you're not driving in a bike lane as well when you see those markings. And then this third picture here, when you're a pedestrian, we've started to put signs out just to remind people that you need to look. You don't get to just walk out and say, I'm in a crosswalk, it's my safety zone. You need to actually look both ways and clear the roadway so that you can pass safely. As a bicyclist, we're getting more and more bike lanes, designated areas with protection for the bicyclists. So as a bicyclist too, make sure you're using the bike lane that's there for you. Make sure too, as a bicyclist, you're obeying the rules of the road. Well, what does that mean? As a bicyclist, you're considered a vehicle. So just like in this picture, you see the cars are going, let's call that a southbound direction. You need to be riding your bike southbound, just like the vehicles. If you're going against traffic, going the wrong way, you could be cited, but even worse off is you could be involved in a collision, because someone pulling out of a driveway is not going to expect to look right and see traffic. They're going to be looking to their left at oncoming traffic, and they may not see you when you're riding the wrong way. So bicyclists need to be going the same direction as traffic, and then using the bike lane if there is one available. See here, just again, some more stuff the city's doing to try and make things safer, giving the bicyclists a clear lane, putting signs up that it lets the drivers know that there is a crosswalk up ahead. Expect to see, if you got signs like that and you see a crosswalk, that pedestrians may be crossing. And then we've got a designated turn lane. That right lane is set up to let people turn into that neighborhood or that complex. Don't be the person that drives straight through because you got lost or your GPS said to keep going straight and you made a mistake. Because let's think about, if we're in this right turn lane and we try to go straight now, we could have a bicyclist to our left that we don't see. And as we then cut back across traffic, we cause a collision. So it's real important to just be watching these roadway markings and looking for these signs. Again, as you become more experienced drivers, this will all become second nature and be very familiar. But as new drivers, a lot of this is going to be very unfamiliar. In some of the areas, in the residential areas where we have long streets, people sometimes have a tendency to not pay attention to their speed. So the city's been putting in some speed humps, and we'll designate that with the white paint just to let you see that it's coming up. Number one, to remind you to slow, but also so that you don't get surprised when you do have that jolt or bump if you are going a little bit faster. So a reminder, you see a speed bump, look at your speedo, make sure that you're driving appropriately for that neighborhood, because you want to keep yourself safe and everybody else around you safe. And again, some more of the things the city's doing. We're actually starting to put up the delineators there to just help keep people from driving in the bike lanes, to keep the bicyclists safe and to separate that area from what is the roadway where cars should be driven to where bicycles should be rode. Some people sometimes ask me, what are these triangles for? Approaching a crosswalk. That again is giving a space cushion for those pedestrians, allowing visibility for everyone. So when you see those arrows and you're approaching a crosswalk, make sure you're stopping back behind those arrows there. My back's got muted there, I'm sorry. So make sure we're stopping behind those arrows. That way, again, we're giving plenty of sight distance for everybody around and other vehicles to see that there are pedestrians crossing the roadway. It's also a good reminder that a lot of times when people are approaching stop signs and even red lights, I get people that stop in the crosswalk. That's against the law. And remember, we're not out there to try and cite just because you did a violation, like, oh, we got you, you did a violation, now you get a ticket. It's because that causes accidents. So if you're in the crosswalk, you might cause a pedestrian or that bicyclist passing by to have to move out and around you, and then they're now out in traffic and they get sideswiped by a vehicle passing by. So make sure, just like in this picture here, we're staying back behind these triangles for the pedestrian crossing, but also remember to give that space cushion when you're approaching a red traffic signal light or a stop sign, to get our stopping done well before that limit line, which is the white painted line or the crosswalk at the intersection. So I know we've covered a lot and gone through it fairly quickly. We'll get to a moment of where we can do some question and answer. But again, I want to just reiterate, make sure with the cell phones, first for the adults, if you're using a cell phone, we can't be holding it, even if we're at a red light. At a red light, you're still driving a vehicle, you're still on the roadway. And people say, well, how can that be unsafe? I've had vehicles that someone's looking over at their cell phone at a red light and they get rear-ended because all the other traffic takes off. They're still stopped in the middle of the roadway. And that other person who might be looking at their cell phone or looking up ahead that all the other vehicles have taken off, they didn't even realize that that vehicle stopped in front of them and they end up rear-ending a vehicle. So that's a very common one, is people using a cell phone while at a stoplight and then not realizing the light turned green and traffic's moving. Even just checking the time is against the law. Now, I don't want to have to cite someone for just grabbing that phone to check the time. You know, it seems almost, some people think it's petty, but I see the collisions daily where people, just that brief second, that 1 or 2 seconds they're looking at the phone, even if it's to check the time, whether stopped or moving, and now they're traveling further down the roadway than they thought based on their speed, and then they're getting involved in a collision. So remember too, if you're driving about even just 40 miles an hour, you're traveling, it's roughly 1.5. If you times the speed you're doing at 1.5, that's the feet per second. So at 40 miles an hour, you're traveling 60 feet per second. And that 60 feet, if you do that just 1 or 2 seconds looking at the phone, you could go half of a football field and not even realize that because you're just looking at your phone. And think about how big a football field is, and you've gone halfway. That pedestrian that you didn't see that was on the sidewalk may have now begun walking out halfway across the roadway, and now you've got a collision. So please keep those phones put away up in a holder. Remember that if we're using a phone, it's got to be in that holder and using Bluetooth or an earphone. Like tonight, I'm using these earphones. This would be illegal to have both earphones in when driving, because then you're not able to hear emergency vehicles' horns. You would have to actually be driving with only one earphone in when you're out on the roadway if you're going to use an earphone headpiece. Otherwise, most of the new cars now have, a lot of you are going to be using Bluetooth, but if you have to use earphones, only one earphone can be in the ear. And then if you're under 18, if you're a minor, you can't use your cell phone at all, not even if you've got Bluetooth in the vehicle, or that you've got the earpiece in, unless it's an emergency and you need to call 911, then that would be your only exception to using the phone. But again, minors under 18, no using the cell phone. Even using that cell phone for GPS would be illegal. So again, I know it's tough with trying to get around, and everybody's used to using a cell phone. We've got Google Maps, but remember all of this stuff, the speed enforcement, the cell phone enforcement, all of the signs is for our safety. Every day we have probably 10 to 15 collisions in Fremont that are injury collisions where someone has pain or a cut or a scrape. And unfortunately, on average, in our smaller city, we have anywhere from 8 to 12 fatal collisions every year where someone loses their life that could have been preventable. In some of the other bigger cities, they can have upwards of 30, 40, or 50 deaths related to automobiles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And again, this is stuff that every one of us can fix. You, me, mom, dad, parents, friends, family, we can all change our behaviors to be safer out on the roadway so that we all make it to our destination safely. Because I don't want to be responsible for injuring someone. I don't want to be responsible for injuring my passengers, and I don't want to injure myself. So really, we can all make a huge difference if we just slow down, obey the rules of the road, don't be in such a hurry, and then remember, if we're going to use that cell phone, keep it up in a holder so that we're not distracted while driving. So I've enjoyed talking with you all tonight, and start going through some question and answer. And then again, remember, if you ever see an officer, if we're on a call, we might be a little bit tied up, but you see us in a shopping center, maybe we're grabbing lunch, and you see the motorcycle officers, we're the traffic safety specialists, and you have a question, feel free to come up and ask us. I would rather you be educated and learn about a sign or an area and understand the law, or even if you were cited for something that you didn't quite understand. But don't hesitate to contact us. And if we're not busy, we're going to do our best to explain and educate you, because again, that's going to help make you and everybody safer. So we'll open it up for some questions if you're ready, Monica.
Yep, I have a few in the chat.
Okay.
All right. Is marijuana allowed if someone smokes in the community or patio?
So marijuana, if it's on a patio, like say an apartment complex, then that's their own residence. We sometimes get complaints that someone smells marijuana, and unfortunately, in apartments and condos, everybody's very close together. Sometimes you're going to get that, but really, if they're on their own patio and they're smoking marijuana, that is allowed. One thing that, might help is getting to know your neighbors, and maybe you could ask them, not to smoke if you've got kids or the smell affects you, but it is allowed. It's just not allowed in a public place. So like, let's say with right now, the outdoor dining, and you're outdoor dining and someone decides, to go sit in the corner table, they're outdoors and they start smoking, that wouldn't be allowed. Again, smoking in their vehicle, even parked in a parking lot, is not allowed. And then anywhere within 1,000 feet of a school. I hope that answers your question. But again, short of being out in the middle of a courtyard or the pool area, let's say at an apartment complex, or walking down the street, that would not be allowed. But again, on their own private patio, that's their residence, that would be allowed.
All right, we have another one in the chat. As the city continues to add traffic calming signs, can one be cited for accidentally driving into one of these areas or going past some of the arrows before a crosswalk? Or do officers have discretion to consider each incident on a case-by-case basis?
That's a great question. So the vehicle code is written, and sometimes when you read it, it is open to interpretation, and some things can be vague. There's what's known as, and when we go through an academy, what's the spirit of the law. So what was that law intended to do? Generally, it's to make us all safer. And then there's the letter of the law. So the letter of the law could be, okay, speeding. Let's go letter of the law on speeding. The speed limit is 35 miles an hour. You're doing 36 miles an hour. By the letter of the law, you are speeding 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. Is an officer going to stop you and cite you for that? No. We all know that, everybody's speedometers, and there's a little bit of room. So some officers may say 10 miles over or 15 miles an hour. Because what's the intent? Well, speeding can cause collisions, or like you mentioned, those arrows are placed down for the crosswalks to give the pedestrian safety. So you go 1 or 2 feet over and we see you, we're not going to stop you and cite you. We might, if we're on the motorcycle, tell you, hey, in the future, please back up. Or if we see you driving in a bike lane or parked in a bike lane, 9 times out of 10, we're going to tell you, why that's illegal and why it could cause a collision. So I would say most of the time we are doing education and letting people know, and it is up to the discretion of the officer. But every situation is going to be a little bit different on what they view and your actions. So it could be a warning or it could be a citation, depending on the situation.
All right, everybody, please feel free to utilize the chat for questions, and also feel free to use that raise hand function. I can go ahead and call on you, and you can unmute yourselves and ask your question. This is your chance. Anybody? Last call. Well, I don't see any hands raised. And I just really want to say thank you, Officer Ramsey. Oh, we got a hand clap. Thank you. Thank you, Officer Ramsey, so much for all the super insightful information that you're providing us tonight. And oh, wait, here we go. We got one more question. Why do so many people jaywalk?
Again, I think that's one of those sometimes where people don't realize what jaywalking is. They don't know if it's illegal, or they think it's not illegal. I'd say, though, the most common excuse I get is they're just in a hurry. They're trying to get across the street from work over to the lunch place to grab a sandwich. And so they just, I thought it'd be easier. I didn't see any cars coming, and I run across the street real quick instead of going up 100 or 200 feet up the street to that crosswalk, having to wait for the lights to signal so they can get across. So I think sometimes they're in a hurry, but other times I think people don't know. So jaywalking, first off, if you're in a residential area and you want to walk from your neighbor's house right across the street, that's not jaywalking. Jaywalking is going to be generally on our busier streets, like let's say Maury or Fremont Avenue. it's in between two controlled intersections. So if we've got an area, let's say on Paseo Padre Parkway, in between Maori and Capitol, there's two crosswalks. You cannot cross, if you cross the roadway anywhere other than those crosswalks, that's jaywalking, because they've got two crosswalks set up there. But if we were to take another road such as Maori Avenue, in between, say, Paseo and Civic Center, you've got Stivers, which is a side street that comes up in between, and that separates these two controlled intersections because we've got the side street there, so people can cross. So sometimes people don't know, because it is a little confusing of when they're allowed to or when they're not. But generally, my best advice would be, because you're not going to probably all remember the vehicle code word for word, do what you think's safe. Always use a crosswalk if there's a crosswalk nearby. That's for your safety. And again, motorists should be looking for pedestrians at a crosswalk. But again, to answer that question directly, the biggest reason for jaywalking is people trying to, save time because they're in a hurry, and they just always think, I'm not going to be the one that gets hit by a car. But sometimes they're running, they didn't realize that car was going so fast and they get hit. So please don't cross the roadway. If there's a crosswalk nearby, take the extra minute or two to walk up the street, use that crosswalk so you can get across safely. And so again, I hope that answers your question.
All right, we got a few more in here. If an emergency vehicle is behind you and you are at a red light, what is the correct thing to do?
Well, as officers too, that's something we actually talk about in our training. If an officer's behind you, as you all know, with the red and blue lights on, or even if it's fire or paramedics, vehicles are supposed to yield and pull to the right. So a lot of times we do get people trying to move over to the left or stopping in the roadway. Please don't do that. Put your signal on. You could even put your hazards on to let others know around you, but begin slowing. It doesn't have to be an immediately an abrupt turn to the right, so that you don't get involved in an accident, but begin slowing and yielding to the right, because the officer is going to, expect, and the same with fire or the ambulance, to pass you on the left. Now, if you're at an intersection, we don't want to push you out into traffic, because you could be sitting at Fremont and Maori and everybody's going eastbound on Maori by you, and you're the first car there. You can't go out into traffic. That wouldn't be safe for you. If you're able to slightly move over, that officer is going to try and get by. Otherwise, he's going to just sit behind you, because we're also trained. We have to be patient. We understand there is traffic, and sometimes there's nothing else, nothing that you can do. So just try to yield, try to move to the right if you can. Otherwise, once that light turns green, begin slowly moving over, or stay where you're at, and the officer will get around you.
All right. What is the most common mistake that teenagers make?
That's a good question. I'd say there's not one in specifically, but when I'm stopping the teenage drivers, like again, back before, COVID hit, and I, would work the areas, because I work around the high schools to keep all the kids safe that are walking to and from school, or to home, or to lunch. But sometimes I would stop the teenagers. Again, they're texting on the cell phone, and I don't know their age, that they're under 18 or over 18, until I stop them. I just see the violation of using the cell phone, which is illegal for any adult, and then find out that they're under 18, so they shouldn't be using a phone at all. But the texting, the speeding, because again, they're just not paying attention. They're talking to their friends. They're trying to get to their friend's house. Everybody's in a hurry. So, doing 55, 60 miles an hour down Mission when the speed limit's only 40 miles an hour. And then allowing your passengers to not wear a seatbelt. Again, you're focused on the road and getting you and your friends somewhere safely. Sometimes you're not looking back and checking, but the driver's responsible for all their passengers. So not only can a driver be cited if they're friend in the back seat doesn't have the seatbelt on, but then the friend in the back seat can also get a ticket for not having their seatbelt on. So there's not one specific thing I see the younger drivers do. I would say it's a combination of really the common violations we see daily: the speeding, the cell phone use, and then the lack of the use of seatbelts. So really important too with the seatbelt, something we didn't really touch on too much tonight, but seatbelts are so important. They're designed to keep you in the seat and let the airbags work around you if you're involved in a bad enough collision that the airbags have to go off. That seatbelt keeps you in place. Without that seatbelt on, you're into the steering wheel, or if you're a passenger, you could be into the windshield or parts of the dash that could cause a severe chest, stomach, or facial injury. So please, please, please wear your seatbelts. It does save lives and prevents worse injuries.
Here's a good one. If I'm still in my 12 months after getting my license, can I have a sibling in the car if we are driving somewhere like to school?
There is it's kind of like one of those asterisks where if you've got parents know, and I encourage any of the parents who are on here or the students to go read. Like if you look at your driver's license and you flip it over and it says provisional, it actually has the vehicle code on there. I believe it's 12814 off the top of my head, but it's got the vehicle code on there that explains all the different rules and things that you can do as far as taking siblings for emergencies, or with parents' consent if you've got to get them to an appointment. So there's some different things in there. But again, as a newer driver, unless it's an emergency or something that can't be worked around, you are a new driver. And I remember being a new driver. I got in an accident my first 6 months driving, just an experience. I made a mistake in a turning movement, turned in front of a car. We're just like doing anything, whether it's a sport or a hobby you pick up. When you're new at something, you're still kind of fumbling around and trying to learn it. In a vehicle, we're not that comfortable. There's so much going on around us that you could get yourself or your passenger injured. I would really advise for that first year to not carry any passengers so that you can really focus on driving safely and get the experience that's needed.
All right, got 2 more questions. Does Fremont offer any driver's ed courses for new teen drivers?
We do not, other than our, stuff like tonight when we have our meetings with the public, stuff that we've done before at the library or here now on Zoom. We don't have anything specifically that you can contact Fremont and sign up with, but feel free to always reach out to our community engagement team to see if there's going to be something coming up, or maybe even some topics like tonight's that you'd like to see discussed more in depth at another community meeting. Because again, we love being involved with our community and educating so that we're all safer.
All right, one last question. Some teenagers play loud music with their windows down. What is the best advice for this?
And I don't know if that's, coming from a parent or adult who's offended by this or seen, but the law is the music can't be heard within 50 feet. 50 feet is rather small. You think about the average car is anywhere from 16 to 20 feet. So a couple car lengths. So it's not illegal to have the windows down and have the music playing. Someone is enjoying their music, but if it's too loud and obnoxious and within 50 feet, you could be cited. There's not going to be an officer at every intersection to cite somebody, and that's not something that you could call into the police department and say, hey, there's someone here driving up the roadway with loud music. We're not going to be able to get an officer out there to cite them. So as parents, I'd remind your teens to keep the music at a suitable level so that we're not disturbing everybody else around us, but also so that we can hear sirens and emergency vehicles and cars honking at us. But if it's loud enough to be heard within 50 feet, and you want to set your radio, maybe even if you want to make sure that you don't ever get stopped by the police officer, and you set it your volume to say number 15 or number 20, go stand outside your vehicle with the windows down and see if it sounds loud and obnoxious. at 50 feet away from the vehicle. But it is, again, 50 feet for that noise violation.
All righty, everybody. I think that is going to be it for tonight. Thank you again, Officer Ramsey, for joining us and hosting this special presentation on teen safety. We hope you all got some insightful bits and nuggets of information. Oh, we have one more question, Yanette.
Yeah, I just noticed in the chat, if we can clarify, they're asking as a teen driver, what do they need to do to get their provisional license? Is that information you can provide us, or is it best handled through the DMV?
The DMV is going to be your best source for, number one, getting the license, the process for the permit, and then that provisional license. We could, I could look it up, but the DMV is going to be your best resource because they provide what all is expected, what type of classes, and just contact the DMV or look online at the CADMV website. That'll give you the best and accurate, up-to-date information.
Okay, everybody. We will be, once again, just as a friendly reminder, we will be sharing this presentation once again after everything is done, and we'll be providing it on our website so you guys can review it again. And please always feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the chat if you have any additional questions or anything like that that maybe you forgot to ask. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we hope you have a great rest of your week and a wonderful night. Take care.